So we're in Advanced Steel and we're taking a look at Graitec stairs and railings. The Graitec stairs and railings palette is available under the Create Macros PowerPack panel tab. So selecting that turns on this palette. If I just turn it, if I select it, it'll turn it off. If I turn it on, it's there. We obviously come to Railings tab here and we're going to create a standard railing. So with that, we can now see it comes up with an activation, and for this we're going to use lines. So with our PowerPack version, you can just select a simple line input or points. You don't have to select a supporting element. You can do that if you so wish, even using a line method. So I'm going to right click and go enter to that. I'm not going to do that. And I'm not going to provide any base points because I want to set those out inside the dialog. I am going to select a nosing point, which is down here. When I do that, the macro will now start to configure the railing to a default that's set within the system. You can actually override the default. You can actually create your own default in the library mechanism provided within the tool. So when that comes in, we'll start to see how the railing is formed. Now it's brought some elements in. Obviously you can see the magenta background, which is what I'm trying to match to. So we need to set about changing this. So the first thing I would probably do is come in and start changing my profiles. So in this case, I'm going to scroll down to a particular section that I require. So I'm going to pick this one here. Just give it a second to load what I require, and then I'm going to come down in here and obviously pick under the all. That will change all the posts within the railing. Now similarly, I'm probably going to stick with that and do a similar thing for the top handrail. I'm going to come down in here again and I'm going to find a suitable section. So in this case, we're going to go for a flat bar because that's the theme we've been using through these series. We're going to come down and select a suitable size for that again. So just scroll down in there and that will be changing that one. And then when that's done, let's just go to the middle rails. There's a slight exception here. I'm just going to turn the 2 on because I actually know I want a shadow rail and a bottom rail, as I would term it. And then I'm going to come into the properties and I'm going to come up to the top level in the tree structure here. And again, I'm going to come down and I'm going to change this to flat. And with that, both of the rails will change to a flat bar. And then obviously I change to the appropriate size that I require. So in this instance, I'm going to choose this one. If I did want to change an individual bar, so section element in there, I would pick within the sub branch of the tree. So in this case, I'm just going to change the bottom one here to 30 by 10. So that's the primary elements for the rail set. So I'm just now going to just pop back to the post tab here, and I'm going to come to the sub tab for positioning. I'm not going to change anything else. Mainly, I'm going to affect the whole railing. So in the tree, make sure I'm at the top level here for all segments, and I'm going to start entering some values in here. And if you look over on the left of the screen, you'll start to see things adjusting as I'm entering values into these variable fields. Now obviously the posts have moved and we can sort of see on the straight bit they're sort of aligned, but on the slope they're not aligned still with my magenta lines. This is because I need to do projected horizontal, and that will now pull them back in line. And I have actually left this as 2 segments, so it's been post distribution has been done by segments. You could do it by total length. You should end up with the same result. Sometimes handy to do by segments if you've got an odd one that you need to move a post and you know you're going to have to do that. So the next thing, we'll just pop back to the handrails. We're just going to stay on the top handrail here. Now we can see that it's set to the top reference of system line. So let's just zoom in a little bit and see what that means. So that at the moment, the rail is a lot higher than what we actually need on the slope to actually what it is on the incline. And even on the level section here, we can see that it's not quite in the right place. So the first thing we should do is change this to outer edge, and that will just drop it down so it's in the correct position. So it's using the outside edge of the flat bar. Similarly, if we just sort of move over to this here, we can now see that we need to get this height down. So this is controlled by this drop down here. Change it to custom, and this activates the field next to it here, and you can input the value in here. And obviously that'll drop down, and don't be alarmed because you'll probably see that the middle rail is actually showing above that now. So what we need to do now is just set about altering the middle rails. So we come to the positioning tab here, and we're going to enter some values in here. So this is the bottom rail is normally position 1, and I'm just going to enter that. It's going to pull that down on the straight, and then I need to do the same on the slope. And then I need to do a little bit of maths. You can see that I've got this figure on the screen here because I've obviously worked it out as to how I want to set this out to achieve the same corresponding gap on the other side. Now I'm going to do a similar thing in here as well. So in here at the moment, you still see it says it's still not looking right, even though we've changed those figures. And that's because we need to actually change this drop down here to say from bottom aligned, and that will align it perpendicular to the slope line. And even now, we still need to do this. We still need to put outer edge so that we can get the distances working from the outer edge. And now we can see we've sort of matched over the top of the magenta setting out. Let's just scroll back up here. Obviously, the stuff here is not quite in the right place again, so we need to adjust this. And obviously, again, just to give you an idea of the figure, you can see where the figure's coming from. So basically, it's the gap distance between the rails when I've sort of taken off my other measurements and the thickness of the materials being used. So with that in place, we have the basis of the rail. We would then pop down to the infill, and we don't have any turned on. So at the moment, let's turn some pickets on, for example. And they obviously come in, and a similar sort of thing. I'd probably come in and change this to a suitable section size, and type first of all. So probably let's go for a round bar, and obviously just give that chance to load. And then we would obviously change that drop down in there, give it a suitable diameter. Then we need to start looking at the arrangement for this. You do have a tree structure in here, but it's normally to do with straight or curved rails. And here I will not change this. I'll leave this to our formula that we use to work out the rails. I just need to change the spacing in here. So this will give an identical gap between each one. And again, I'm probably going to just change this to actually be straight. So that actually means that this center will now be 100 millimeters in the horizontal direction for every single infill bar. So when that's done, that's the basis of that rail. But obviously, we've still got to activate the pickets infill bars at the start and end of the rail. So that's this panel here, down here. This will activate in a second, and we will do the same corresponding thing at the top end. So by activating the checkbox, and obviously while that's happening, we just notice we might need to make an adjustment to the measurement, because at the moment I can see that the picket is right on the end. So when that other one's activated, I'll just come in and make a slight adjustment. Let me just zoom in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. So let's just change that value in there. This will recalculate the spacing in this end panel. This is quite useful actually if you're using setting it out and using a return as well. If you've watched some of my other videos, you'll see that in there. And let's do the same thing at the top. I didn't zoom out to see that, but it is changing that as well. So the next element is I'll probably take a look at the base plate. So that will be under post connectors. So we're going to put a flat plate on here with some bolts in it. So we just change to post connectors, and we'll pick this type here, which is a plate with bolts. So this activates, and actually now the connection definition will be defined once the plate appears inside the macro. So with that in place, we're going to leave it as a rectangular form. We're just going to change the thickness to 10 millimeters, and we're making sure that we're on all segments in the tree here as well. So let's just change that to 10. So that means all the plates for the bottom of the rails will be 10 millimeters thick. I'm going to leave the post alignment set to aligned actually, so it cuts it following the slope. If you put it to horizontal, it'll cut it level. It's probably some people you might need to do that if it was a step or something, I think. So with that in place, I can then come in and start altering this. So I'm going to alter the dimensions of the plate. I'm going to set up obviously the length of the plate and the width of the plate, and the bolt dimensions are actually controlled separately to that. So I would need to change to the connectors and the positioning tab for that in due course. So let's just change that in there to 120. There's a couple of offset fields in here, which I'll come back to in a minute. But these fields you will actually use to actually move the plate on the slope segment of the rail. So when that's adjusted, we're just going to go into the connectors and we're just going to leave it on bolts. So you can put anchors if you want, or just have a weld even. So I'm going to change the bolt diameter. Obviously use a bolt if I was bolting to the top of a channel, an anchor if I was bolting to concrete or a plinth or something, concrete stair, etc. So when that's set, we need to come in and change to the positioning tab. We're not going to change the pattern of the bolt. We're just going to leave it 2 and 2. We're just going to affect the actual dimension. So this is actually across the plate. So you won't actually see that change in here. We're then going to change the spacing along the plate. And basically what we're trying to do is get a 30mm edge distance. So we're just altering that in this dialog. Now you can move the bolts relative to the post center in this tab here. So they're actually move inside the plate itself. But sometimes you might want to actually alter the bolts and the plates together, and then I found it's better to come in and possibly do it inside here. So I'm just going to put a value in there. Now if I do that, actually I should actually stop myself doing that. What I need to do is actually come back to the tree, and this is where the tree comes in now, because I need to actually change the value under the right segment of the rail. So I'm going to make sure I'm in segment 1, and I'm going to put this value in here of 20mm. And this will move the plate and the bolts up the line of the slope. Now, sometimes people do this if the bolts are quite tight to the post, just to give them a little bit more room to get the fixing in place. And if we just check at the top here, we'll just pan across to that, you can see that the top plate is still remaining centrally spaced about the post. Also, you can affect the junction between the two rails, and we call that the handrail to handrail connection, and it's under handrail connections and a sub-tab of handrail to handrail. Again, we see use of the tree. Now, if I was to come into this and like just select right at the top level, we only have one corner actually, but if I had multiple corners in it, it would affect every single corner. If I select at the corner, it affects this corner, and this is what they call the corner junction in the rail. And then just to show you what happens, let's just change to a swan neck, and you'll see these three rail elements, top rail, two middle rails, shadow and bottom, change and have a swan neck detail added into them. Now, that might not be necessarily what you require. So even though we've changed all those, we can now come down into the different branches of the tree, and let's look at the middle rail. So this is actually number 1 is the bottom rail. And if we change that back to a mitre in there, we'll see this sort of step removed and come back to follow the line across the bottom of the rail here. And now we can take a look at the top of the middle rail. So for that, we'd pick number 2, and even with that, we can see that this is not quite in the right place. It's too close here. And the way this works is you just need to know the vertical figure in here to adjust to. So I just did a couple of setting out lines to work out the basis of what I needed so that I can put the accurate figure in to move it across. So as you enter that, it actually extends the sloping rail and reduces the horizontal segment and obviously the vertical segment. I'm not actually going to change the top rail. I'm going to sort of leave that where it is. So it's got a 200mm height difference. So that sort of followed that line. So that actually is the railing. As we've sort of very quickly run through that, you can see that I've got a different size segment, 30 by 10 on the bottom there, 40 by 10 there at the top. And obviously I've got a 50mm top rail, a 40mm square post, and obviously I've got my offset base plates, and I've got my different junctions between the two rails. So hopefully that gives you a quick insight how to use the railing macro to create sloped and horizontal panels in one arrangement. Thank you.
Graitec.